The rain had stopped, but the street still smelled like wet asphalt and shame. Zariah Cole kept her head down, hood pulled tight over her braids, fingers wrapped around the plastic bag of leftover cornbread from the diner. She moved quickly along Peachtree Street, boots splashing through shallow puddles, trying to make herself invisible. It never worked. Lord have mercy. Is that the Cole girl? The voice cut through the evening air like a blade. Zariah's steps faltered. She didn't look up. She never looked up. 3 women stood outside New Hope Baptist, their Sunday best still crisp despite the humidity. Sister Diane, Sister Patterson, and Mother Louise, pillars of the community, gatekeepers of respectability, judges of the fallen. Poor thing, Sister Patterson said, loud enough to carry. Still hiding that face, I see. Zariah's jaw tightened. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her left cheek, fingers brushing the ridge of scar tissue that ran from her temple to her chin. The burn had healed years ago. The stairs never did. You'd think she'd stay inside, Mother Louise added, fanning herself with a church bulletin. Spare folks the discomfort. Zariah forced her feet to move. Just keep walking. Just get home. I heard she got fired again, Sister Diane whispered, not quietly enough. 3rd job this month. Nobody wants that energy around their establishment. Laughter followed. Not cruel, exactly worse. Pity wrapped in mockery, concern dipped in contempt, the kind of cruelty that wore a smile and called itself Christian love. Zariah's eyes burned. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not for them. She was almost past them when Mother Louise called out, Zariah, honey, we're praying for you. The words landed like stones. Zariah stopped. For one dangerous moment, she considered turning around, considered asking them what exactly they were praying for her healing or her disappearance, considered reminding them that Jesus ate with lepers and loved the broken. But she didn't. She just stood there, shoulders hunched, breathing through the weight of their judgment. And then the street changed. The laughter died mid-sentence. The women's voices cut off like someone had flipped a switch. Even the evening traffic seemed to hush. Zariah looked up. 3 black SUVs rolled down Peachtree Street in perfect formation, sleek and gleaming, moving with the quiet authority of money and power. The kind of vehicles that didn't belong in this neighborhood. The kind that turned heads and silenced gossip. They stopped directly in front of her. Zariah's breath caught. The women behind her went completely still. The tinted window of the center vehicle lowered slowly, deliberately. She couldn't see inside. The interior was too dark, the evening light too dim. But she felt it. The weight of someone's gaze, focused, unwavering, assessing. Not with pity, not with disgust, with something else entirely. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She should move, should run, should do anything but stand there frozen like prey under a predator's eyes. But she couldn't look away. The moment stretched, thick with tension and possibility. The street held its breath. Even the church women had forgotten to whisper. Then, just as suddenly as they'd arrived, the window rolled up. The engine purred. The SUVs glided forward, disappearing around the corner like shadows swallowed by twilight. Zariah stood alone on the sidewalk, pulse racing, cornbread forgotten in her trembling hands. Behind her, Mother Louise finally found her voice. What in the world was that? Zariah didn't answer. She couldn't, because for the first time in 3 years, someone had looked at her, really looked at her, and hadn't turned away. There was a time when Zariah Cole walked with her chin up. Before the fire, before the scar, before the silence, became her only defense. She had been beautiful once, not in the apologetic way people say it now, voices dipping with pity, but beautiful in a way that stopped traffic. Her mother had been Ghanaian, her father Black American from Georgia, and Zariah carried both legacies in her warm brown skin, her wide-set eyes, and the natural curve of her smile. She'd worn her hair in long braids that swung when she laughed, and she'd laughed often back then. She'd had dreams, big ones, culinary school, her own restaurant chain, a life that tasted like possibility. Her father's restaurant, Cole's Kitchen, had been her whole world, a small soul food spot on Auburn Avenue, known for its Sunday catfish and peach cobbler that made grown men cry. Zariah had grown up in that kitchen, learning to season collard greens at 8, perfecting cornbread by 12. Her father used to say she had magic in her hands. "You're going to run this place one day, baby girl," he'd told her on her 21st birthday, his hand warm on her shoulder. "Build it into something bigger than I ever could." She'd believed him. Then came Simone. Her father had met the woman at a business conference in Savannah. Simone was polished, charming, everything a lonely widower might want after 5 years alone. She wore designer clothes that whispered money, spoke with the kind of refined diction that made people lean in, and treated Zariah with calculated kindness. "You're so talented," Simone would say, watching Zariah work. "Your father is lucky to have you." The words always felt like they had teeth. Simone brought her daughter, too, Brittany, a year younger than Zariah, pretty in a practiced way, the kind of girl who knew how to smile for cameras and cry on command. They moved into the house 6 months after the wedding. Zariah tried. She really did. She set extra places at dinner, shared her recipes, made space. But space, she would learn, was never enough for people who wanted everything. Her father died on a Tuesday. Heart attack. Sudden, devastating. One moment he was laughing over breakfast, the next he was gone, and Zariah's world fractured into before and after. At the funeral, Simone wore black Chanel and wept beautifully. Brittany held her mother's hand, and Zariah stood alone by the casket, numb and unmoored, feeling the first cold fingers of abandonment wrap around her throat. The will reading came a week later. Cole's Kitchen went to Simone. The house, the savings, the insurance policies, all of it transferred to the wife of less than 2 years. Zariah got a small trust fund, accessible at 25, and a single line of hollow comfort. "My daughter will always have a home." Simone smiled across the lawyer's desk. "Of course she will. We're family." The lie tasted like poison. Within a month, things changed. Simone began making improvements to the restaurant. New menu, new staff, new management. Zariah's recipes were shelved, her input dismissed, her presence tolerated rather than welcomed. "You're still learning, sweetheart," Simone said, voice dripping with false concern. "Let the professionals handle this." Zariah worked harder, stayed later, tried to prove her worth in the place that bore her father's name. She didn't see the trap closing until it was too late. The night of the fire, Zariah was alone. Simone had sent the rest of the staff home early budget cuts, she'd said, and asked Zariah to finish inventory and lock up. It wasn't unusual. Zariah had been closing the restaurant by herself for weeks, taking on shifts nobody else wanted, trying desperately to make herself indispensable. She should have known better. The smoke started just after midnight. Zariah was in the back office, checking receipts when she smelled it. Sharp, chemical, wrong. She stood, heart already racing, and opened the door to find the hallway engulfed in flames. They weren't normal flames. They moved too fast, burned too hot, fed by something accelerant-soaked and deliberate. She ran for the front exit. Locked. Side door. Locked. Kitchen exit. Locked from the outside. Panic clawed up her throat. She grabbed her phone, dialed 911, screamed the address through smoke-choked lungs. The heat was unbearable now, the air turning toxic. She could hear the building groaning, feel the floor beneath her buckling. She tried the windows, barred for security, trapped. The fire found her in the kitchen, her father's kitchen, the place she'd learned to create and dream. It came for her face first, a wall of searing heat and liquid agony that stole her screams and melted her skin. She doesn't remember much after that, just pain, sirens, hands, pulling her through smoke, the night sky spinning above her as she lay on the pavement, half her face burning, the other half crying. The hospital was a blur of surgeries and bandages and doctors with careful voices. Second and third degree burns, scarring, likely permanent. Skin grafts, possible, but expensive. Simone visited once. She stood in the doorway of Zariah's hospital room, Brittany beside her, both of them wearing expressions of practiced sorrow. "Thank God you're alive," Simone said. She didn't come closer, didn't touch Zariah's hand, just stood there, designer purse clutched to her chest, eyes already calculating. "The restaurant is gone," she continued. "Total loss. But the insurance will cover it, thank the Lord." Zariah's voice came out, broken and raw. "What happened?" "Electrical fire," Simone said smoothly. "Old building, faulty wiring. The inspector said it was waiting to happen." Lie. Zariah could taste it even through the morphine fog. "You'll stay with us while you recover, of course," Simone added. "We'll take care of you." The insurance payout came to $470,000. Zariah never saw a cent. Simone handled everything, the paperwork, the hospital bills, the arrangements. She paid the minimum for Zariah's medical care, pocketed the rest, and when Zariah was finally discharged, bandaged and broken, Simone sat her down in the living room and laid out the new reality. "People will stare," she said gently. "They'll talk. It's not fair, but it's true. So, for your own protection, I think it's best if you keep a low profile. Cover up when you go out. Stay home when possible. Let yourself heal without all those judgmental eyes. Translation: hide yourself. You're an embarrassment now." Brittany watched from the doorway, something like satisfaction flickering across her pretty face. Zariah was 22 years old, scarred, penniless, and utterly alone, and she believed every word. 3 years passed like a slow burial. Zariah became a shadow in her own story. She woke before dawn, cooked breakfast for Simone and Brittany, cleaned the house that used to be hers, and disappeared into the background like furniture. By day, she worked whatever jobs would take someone who wouldn't show her face. Dishwashing, late-shift warehouses, delivery routes where she could stay in the van. By night, she served Simone's dinner parties, hood pulled low, eyes downcast, while Brittany's friends whispered and pointed. "Is that the girl who—" "Yes, the fire. So tragic. Why doesn't she get surgery?" "I heard she can't afford it." The cruelty was casual, reflexive. They didn't mean to be monsters. They just didn't see her as human anymore. Simone reinforced it daily with small surgical cuts. "Maybe don't go to the grocery store today, Zariah. I'll send Brittany instead. Cover up a bit more, sweetheart. You're making the guests uncomfortable." "I'm not being cruel. I'm protecting you from a world that won't understand." Zariah learned to shrink, to apologize for existing, to believe that love, intimacy, visibility, all of it, belonged to the version of herself that burned away 3 years ago. Some nights, alone in the tiny room they'd relegated her to, she stood in front of the mirror and touched her face. The scar tissue was raised and discolored, running from her left temple down to her jaw. The skin grafts had helped, but not enough. She looked like someone who'd survived something terrible. She looked like a victim, and she hated it. Not the scar itself. She'd made peace with the physical reality, but the way it had become her entire identity, the way people saw the damage first, and the woman never. She used to dream. Now, she just survived. She used to believe in second chances. Now, she believed in staying small enough not to get hurt again. Love was for whole people. Beautiful people. People who hadn't been locked in a burning building and left to die. Love wasn't for ghosts. Kang Seojin didn't do pity. He'd built his empire on calculated risks, strategic violence, and the kind of cold intelligence that made weaker men nervous. At 34, he controlled half the import operations in Atlanta, owned legitimate businesses, that washed money cleaner than Sunday sheets and commanded loyalty through respect rather than fear. He was second-generation Korean American, raised between two worlds and belonging fully to neither. His father had wanted him to be a doctor. His mother had wanted him safe. Seo-jin had chosen power instead and wore the consequences without apology. He was also exhausted. Not physically, he could go days without sleep when necessary, but emotionally, spiritually, the kind of tired that came from years of watching people perform, posture, and pretend. Everyone wanted something. Everyone had an angle. It made genuine moments rare, precious. He'd been driving through East Atlanta when he saw her. The church women, their cruel laughter, and the girl with her head down, shoulders hunched beneath a hood. He'd ordered his driver to slow, watched the scene unfold with the detached interest of someone studying human behavior. Then she looked up, just for a second, just long enough for him to see her face. The scar didn't shock him. Seo-jin had seen worse. He'd inflicted worse. What caught his attention was the dignity, the way she held herself, despite the mockery, the quiet strength radiating from someone the world had clearly tried to break. "Pull over," he said quietly. His men obeyed without question. 3 SUVs, 6 armed bodyguards, and enough presence to silence an entire street. Seo-jin lowered the window. She stood frozen, caught in his gaze, and he felt something shift. Recognition, maybe, not of her face, but of something deeper, a fellow survivor. Kolan. Someone who'd walked through fire, literal or metaphorical, and refused to stay down. He didn't speak, didn't need to, just held her eyes long enough to communicate what words couldn't. "I see you, not your damage, you." Then he left, because interest wasn't enough. He needed information. "Find out everything," he told his head of security an hour later. "Name, background, family, employment, and find out about that scar." The report came back within 48 hours. Zariah Cole, 25. Father, deceased. Stepmother, Simone Cole, currently residing in Buckhead. Restaurant fire 3 years prior. Suspicious origin, insurance payout to Simone Cole, in full. Zariah's medical bills, barely covered. Her inheritance, blocked until age 25. Her current status, unpaid labor, multiple part-time jobs, no savings. The fire investigators' report, buried in city records, evidence of accelerant. Case closed as accidental due to insufficient evidence. Translation: someone paid someone to look the other way. Seo-jin read the file twice, his jaw tightening with each line. He'd seen injustice before. Hell, he'd profited from it. But this calculated cruelty, this theft of life and future from a grieving daughter, it triggered something visceral. He made 2 calls. The first, to his legal team. "I want everything on Simone Cole. Financial records, business dealings, insurance claims, everything." The second, to himself. "Don't get involved. This isn't your fight." But he knew he would anyway. Because some people were worth the inconvenience. Zariah found him on a Thursday night, bleeding in an alley behind the diner. She'd been taking out trash, her least favorite task, because it meant being visible, vulnerable. The alley was poorly lit, smelling of rotting food and old rain. She usually moved fast, kept her head down, but tonight she heard breathing. Labored, pained, human. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away. Nothing good happened in alleys after dark. She knew that. She'd lived that, but she couldn't. "Hello?" Her voice came out smaller than intended. The breathing stopped. She stepped closer, pulse hammering, and saw him, a man slumped against the brick wall, one hand pressed to his side, dark liquid seeping between his fingers. His suit was expensive, ruined now. His face was controlled despite obvious pain, and his eyes dark, sharp, assessing, locked onto hers without flinching. "You should go," he said. His voice was calm, too calm, For someone losing blood. You're hurt. Observant. I'm calling 911. Don't. The word was steel. Please. Zariah hesitated. This was stupid. Dangerous. None of her business. But she'd been left to burn once. She knew what abandonment tasted like. She set down the trash bag and moved closer, keeping her movements slow. Let me see. Ah. He watched her approach with the wariness of a predator assessing threat, but he moved his hand. The wound wasn't as bad as the blood suggested. A deep gash along his ribs, probably from a blade, needed stitches, not surgery. I have a first aid kit inside, she said. I can clean it, bandage it, but you should see a doctor. I will. Later. What's your name? Zariah. Yours? Jean. He lied smoothly. She knew it was a lie. Didn't call him on it. She brought the kit, worked quickly and carefully, her hands steady despite her nerves. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just watched her with unsettling focus. You're good at this, he said. I used to want to be a nurse. Before. Before what? She didn't answer. Tape the last bandage. You're done. Try not to die. Why did you help me? The question caught her off guard. She looked at him fully for the first time, forgetting to hide her face, forgetting the scar. Because nobody should bleed alone in an alley. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Respect. Thank you, Zariah. He stood, moving with predatory grace despite the injury, and pulled out his wallet. For your trouble. I don't want money. Then what do you want? She met his eyes. For you to be more careful, he smiled. Actually smiled. It transformed his face, made him look almost gentle. I'll try. He left the alley, disappeared into the night, and Zariah stood there, wondering why her heart was racing. She didn't know she'd just saved the most dangerous man in Atlanta. She didn't know he'd already decided she was worth protecting. The invitation arrived on a Saturday. Thick cardstock, gold lettering, hand-delivered. A charity gala at the Piedmont Grand, hosted by Atlanta's elite. Simone had been preening about it for weeks. Zariah saw it on the counter, addressed to the Cole family. You're not going, Simone said, not looking up from her phone. It says family, and you'd embarrass us. Stay home. Brittany laughed from the living room. Mom's right. This is a high-profile event. Important people. You understand. Mom. Zariah understood perfectly. For 3 years, she'd understood, accepted, obeyed. But something had shifted. Maybe it was the man in the alley, the way he'd looked at her, like she mattered. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was rage, finally finding its voice. I'm going, she heard herself say. Simone's head snapped up. Excuse me? I'm going to the gala. No, you're not. You can't stop me. The air went arctic. Simone stood, fury and calculation warring across her face. If you show up and humiliate this family, there will be consequences. What are you going to do? Zariah's voice was steady now, surprising even herself. Burn me again? The words hung between them like an accusation. Simone's face went white. How dare you? I dare. Zariah walked away before she could lose her nerve. The night of the gala, she dressed in the only nice thing she owned, a simple black dress, 3 years old, still elegant. She left her hood behind. The Piedmont Grand was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, women in designer gowns, and men in tailored tuxedos. Zariah felt every eye turn as she entered, felt the whispers start like wildfire. She held her head high anyway. Simone spotted her immediately, fury blazing. She crossed the room with Brittany in tow, voice low and venomous. You stupid, ungrateful. Is there a problem here? The voice came from behind Zariah, smooth and commanding. She turned, and there he was, the man from the alley, Jin. Except he wasn't Jin at all. Kang Seojin stood in a midnight blue tuxedo, radiating power and danger, his dark eyes fixed on Simone with predatory focus. The entire ballroom went quiet. "Mr. Kang?" Simone stammered, shock replacing rage. "I didn't realize this is just a family matter." "This woman," Seojin said, moving to stand beside Zariah, "is with me." The room erupted in whispers. He offered Zariah his arm. May I have this dance?" She took it, feeling like she'd stepped into someone else's life. On the dance floor, surrounded by Atlanta's elite, Seojin held her gently, his hand warm against her back. "You lied about your name," she said. "You didn't call me on it. Why are you doing this?" "Because you saved my life, and because they tried to erase yours." His eyes were serious, intense. "Let me return the favor." The music swelled. And slowly, deliberately, Zariah reached up and pulled back her hair, letting the scar show fully for the first time in 3 years. She didn't hide, and Seojin didn't look away. The unraveling began quietly, then cascaded like dominoes. Seojin's legal team was surgical. They didn't need violence. They had something far more devastating: evidence. The fire investigators' original notes, pre-editing, security footage from the restaurant showing Simone leaving with the only set of keys the night of the fire. Bank records documenting the insurance payout and its immediate diversion into offshore accounts, falsified medical expense reports. The fraud was undeniable. The district attorney's office received an anonymous package. So did 3 major news outlets. So did the IRS. Within a week, Simone Cole's world imploded. Federal investigation, frozen assets, arrest warrant. The society, women who'd once fawned over her, now crossed the street to avoid association. The charities returned her donations. The club memberships evaporated. Brittany turned on her mother immediately, claiming ignorance, hiring her own attorney, trying desperately to save herself. There would be no saving. Zariah watched it unfold from a distance, staying in the guest suite of Seojin's penthouse at his insistence. "You're not going back there," he'd said. Not a request. A fact. She'd expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, satisfied. Instead, she felt hollow. "Justice doesn't heal trauma," Seojin told her one evening, standing beside her on the balcony overlooking the city. "It just stops the bleeding." "Then what does heal it?" "Time, therapy, choosing yourself every day until it becomes natural." He'd already arranged both: a trauma specialist, a reconstructive surgeon who specialized in burn recovery. Not to erase the scar, Zariah had been clear she wasn't interested in that, but to address the nerve damage, the tightness, the physical pain she'd carried silently. "Why?" she asked him. "Why do all this for me?" "Because you helped a stranger in an alley without knowing if he'd kill you. Because you walked into that gala with your head high when it would have been easier to hide. Because," he paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. "Because you're the first real thing I've encountered in a very long time. I'm not a project. I know, you're a person who deserves justice, and I'm a man with the resources to provide it." He turned to face her fully. "I'm not saving you, Zariah. You saved yourself the moment you chose to show up. I'm just making sure the world acknowledges it." The trial took 6 months. Simone Cole was convicted of insurance fraud, arson, and criminal negligence. 15 years. Federal prison. Brittany got probation and community service, her future significantly smaller than she'd planned. The settlement, what remained after legal fees and restitution, was returned to Zariah. $400,000. Her father's legacy. Her future. She stood in the courthouse lobby after the verdict, surrounded by reporters she ignored, and called her therapist. "I don't feel better," she admitted. "You're not supposed to yet, doctor," Morrison said gently. "You're supposed to feel everything. The anger, the grief, the loss. And then, slowly, you're supposed to build something new." So she did. Zariah opened the foundation on her father's birthday. Cole's legacy, dedicated to supporting burn survivors, medical care, therapy, job training, housing assistance, everything she'd needed and been denied, now available to others. The opening ceremony was small, intimate. People who mattered. Seojin stood beside her, his hand brushing hers, offering silent support. They'd been together for 18 months now, slowly, carefully, building something real on a foundation of honesty rather than rescue fantasies. He'd shown her his world, the darkness and the light. She'd shown him hers, the scars visible and invisible. Neither had tried to fix the other. They just chose each other, daily, deliberately. "You're staring," she said, smiling. "I'm admiring. There's a difference? One is passive, the other is active appreciation." She laughed, the sound free and genuine. She laughed often now. The foundation grew quickly. Media coverage, donor interest, survivor testimonials. Zariah became a spokesperson, her face scar, and all on billboards and websites. She didn't hide anymore. Not because she was brave, because she was tired of shrinking. The wedding happened 2 years later on a beach in Tybee Island. Small ceremony, close friends, family that actually meant something. Zariah wore ivory, her hair in locks now, twisted into an elegant updo. The scar was visible, catching sunlight, part of her story, but no longer the whole narrative. Seojin cried when he saw her. Actually, cried. "You're beautiful," he whispered when she reached him. "I know," she whispered back, and meant it. The vows were simple, honest, promises they'd both keep because they'd learned the cost of broken ones. At the reception, Zariah's therapist approached her, smiling. "How do you feel?" "Whole," Zariah said. "Not healed, not perfect, but whole. That's the goal." Later, dancing under string lights with her husband, Zariah thought about the girl she'd been, the one who believed love required perfection, the one who thought scars made her unworthy. That girl had died in the fire. This woman, scarred, strong, still healing, had been born in its aftermath. The world hadn't changed. People still stared. Some still whispered. But Zariah had changed. She'd learned that dignity wasn't given, it was claimed. That beauty wasn't about symmetry, but authenticity. That love wasn't for the perfect, but for the brave enough to be seen. She'd been chosen by a man who saw her worth. But more importantly, she'd chosen herself. And that was everything. "What are you thinking about?" Seojin asked, pulling her closer. "How far I've come. How far we've come." "Yes," she agreed, resting her head against his chest. "That too." The music played on. The night deepened. And somewhere in Atlanta, a foundation bearing her father's name helped another survivor take their first step toward reclaiming their life. Zariah Cole had been burned, broken, and buried alive. But she'd risen anyway. Not despite the fire, because of it.